In the high peaks of the Andes, where the mountains touch the clouds and the stars burn bright against the night sky, the Incas told stories that shaped their world. These were not mere legends, but living truths, tales of creation, of gods and heroes, of rituals that bound the earth to the heavens. Tonight you will journey into these ancient myths. Let the words carry you across valleys and sacred temples, through realms of sun and moon, life and death. This is the mythology of the Inca, stories whispered by firelight, passed through generations, and alive even now in the spirit of the Andes. Long before the mountains rose to kiss the sky, before rivers carved their silver paths across the valleys, and before humankind walked the earth, there was only the quiet mystery of the void. The Incas, the children of the high Andes, believed that the universe was born not from chaos, but from the breath of sacred forces that brought order to silence. In their telling, existence was woven like a great fabric, where every thread had a meaning, and every knot was a connection between the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. At the center of this creation stood Viracocha, the great creator god. He was not a distant figure, but a presence that shaped both the seen and unseen worlds. Emerging from the endless waters of Lake Titicaca, he stepped upon the earth and brought forth light where there was only darkness. With his staff and his will, he commanded the sun, the moon, and the stars to rise into the heavens. The first dawn spilled over the Andes, and the cold shadows of eternal night gave way to warmth and clarity. But Viracocha did more than summon the celestial bodies. From stone he shaped the first beings. His hands molded figures of giants and humans, but these early creations did not please him. Some were clumsy, others defiant. In the stories told around firelight, the people said that Viracocha, seeing his work flawed, sent a great flood to wash them away, to begin anew. The waters swallowed valleys and peaks, leaving only silence behind. From this cleansing, he shaped humanity again, this time with more care, granting them breath, purpose, and memory. The Incas believed that humans were not placed upon the earth as masters, but as part of a sacred balance. Viracocha set them to live in harmony with the land, to honor the mountains, rivers, and stars. Each stone, each tree, each gust of wind was thought to hold a spirit, a fragment of that original creation. Life was not separate from the divine, it was the divine, living in countless forms. As Viracocha walked across the vastness of the Andes, he gave instructions to the people he created. He taught them how to live, how to honor the earth, and how to remember the gods. Then, according to legend, he vanished across the sea, walking westward into the horizon. Some say he disappeared into the foam of the Pacific Ocean, promising one day to return. The image of a bearded figure, clothed in white, carried through generations as both a mystery and a prophecy. For the Incas, this was not simply a myth of beginnings. It was a reminder that life itself was born from water, light, and divine will. To watch the sunrise from the peaks of the Andes was to relive the first dawn created by Viracocha. Each new day was a continuation of that sacred act, a renewal of the balance that bound gods, humans, and nature together. The storytellers would remind their listeners that Viracocha's departure was not abandonment, but trust. By leaving the world in the care of humans, he had placed a sacred responsibility upon their shoulders. To plant the seeds, to care for the animals, to build with stone and spirit. These were not just tasks of survival, but acts of devotion. To live in balance was to honor the Creator. To stray from this balance was to invite disharmony, a reminder of the great flood that once cleansed the earth of pride and negligence. It was said that Viracocha had taught humanity not only skills of survival, but also the rhythms of memory. He gave them the gift of language, not written upon parchment or carved into stone, but spoken, carried through the air like the breath of life. In the Andes, words were more than communication. They were bridges between generations. Each tale spoken at night by the fireside was an offering, a renewal of the pact between humanity and the gods. Legends whispered of Viracocha's journey after creation. As he walked across the land, he is said to have shaped the contours of the Andes with his staff, raising peaks and hollowing valleys. Every step left marks upon the world. Some valleys bore his footprints, some rocks were said to be the giants he turned to stone when they disobeyed his laws. To wander the Andes, then, was to walk through a living memory of the god's passage, a sacred landscape where every feature carried a story. Among the people there lingered also the prophecy of his return. Though he had vanished into the sea, generations carried the belief that one day Viracocha would come again, bringing renewal, balance, and perhaps judgment. The horizon of the Pacific was not an end, but a promise. To watch the sun sink into the waters was to imagine the hidden journey of the Creator, far beyond sight, yet never beyond presence. And so, the Incas lived between memory and hope, between the first dawn and the dream of the final return. Their world was not empty space, but a sacred fabric woven by the will of Viracocha. To breathe, to walk, to see the stars was to live within his creation. Every moment was part of that eternal beginning, and every dawn was a reminder that light had triumphed once over darkness and would continue to do so as long as balance was kept. Yet even after the world was shaped and life had begun, the skies above still demanded reverence. From the heavens came the light of Inti and the glow of Mamakila, whose stories would guide the destiny of the Inca. After the first dawn and the shaping of the world by Viracocha, the Incas told another story, one that tied the divine creation to their own beginnings as a people. While Viracocha had formed humanity, it was the sun, Inti, who gave the Incas their special place within the balance of the cosmos. Inti was more than light. He was warmth, the giver of harvests, the golden heart of the sky. His rays embraced the mountains each morning and gave strength to the fields of maize, potatoes, and quinoa. For the Incas, Inti was both father and sustainer, a god whose presence was seen every single day, rising faithfully from the horizon. To ensure that his children would live in harmony with the earth, Inti sent forth two beings from the sacred waters of Lake Titicaca, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo. They were not ordinary mortals, but divine emissaries, carrying the wisdom and authority of the sun itself. Emerging from the shimmering waters, they were clothed in regal garments, their foreheads crowned with the light of their father. The couple was tasked with a mission, to find a place where they could found a city that would become the center of the world. To guide them, Inti gave them a golden staff, a sacred rod that would sink into the earth when they reached the destined place. Carrying this staff, they journeyed through valleys and mountains, through lands that would one day be united under the empire of the Incas. Everywhere they passed, they shared the teachings of agriculture, weaving, and respect for the gods. Manco Capac taught men how to till the soil, how to raise crops, and how to build shelters. Mama Oclo, wise and patient, taught women how to weave, how to nurture the home, and how to care for children. In this way, the divine pair spread not just survival skills, but the structure of society itself, as if the very fabric of civilization had been woven from their hands. The staff, however, did not sink easily. In some places, the earth resisted. In others, the soil was thin and rocky. But at last, in the fertile valley of the Andes, the rod plunged effortlessly into the ground. There, beneath the gaze of towering mountains, Manco Capac declared the chosen place, Cusco, the navel of the world. From this sacred beginning, The Incas traced their lineage. They were not just a people, they were the children of the sun, descendants of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo. This divine ancestry gave them the right and the duty to rule not through conquest alone, but through sacred responsibility. To govern was to maintain the order set forth by Inti, to ensure that balance was kept between the earth, the people, and the gods. In Cusco, they built temples and homes, streets and plazas, all aligned with the stars and the mountains. The city was not a mere settlement, it was a cosmic center, the place where heaven and earth touched. From its heart, lines called sikes radiated outward like rays of the sun, connecting temples, shrines, and sacred places across the land. Every stone placed in Cusco was a reflection of the order established at the dawn of time. For the Incas, to remember the journey of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo was to remember their identity. Festivals celebrated their emergence from Lake Titicaca, dancers reenacted their steps, and priests retold their mission. Each act was a renewal of the connection between the people and their divine origins. As the empire grew, stretching across valleys, deserts, and forests, the Incas never forgot that their greatness began with a golden staff and the will of the sun. The tale of their ancestors was not a distant legend, but a living truth, whispered by the rivers, guarded by the mountains, and carried in the hearts of every child of the Andes. But the sun and the moon were not alone in shaping existence. Beneath their watchful gaze, the Incas believed the universe was divided into realms, worlds that lay above, below, and within the life of every human being. For the Incas, the universe was not a single, flat space. It was a great layered reality, woven together like the steps of a sacred ladder. They called it the three Pachas, three worlds that coexisted, touching one another, yet each with its own essence. To live was not only to walk upon the earth, but also to remain in connection with the heavens above and the mysteries below. Above all shone the Hanan Pacha, the world of the sky. Here dwelled the most powerful gods, the radiant sun, Inti, his gentle sister the moon, Mama Kilya, and the stars that watched like countless eyes. Hanan Pacha was the realm of order and brilliance, where divine beings traced their eternal paths across the firmament. To look up at the night sky from the peaks of the Andes was not simply to see stars, but to glimpse the eternal fires of the gods, guiding the lives of mortals. Below the heavens stretched the Pacha, the middle world, the space of the living. This was the world of humans, animals, rivers, mountains, and fields. Here life unfolded with all its struggles and joys, a place where the gifts of the sun and the earth were received and honored. But Pacha was not ordinary. Every stone, every breeze, every spring was alive with spirit. To walk through it was to be surrounded by sacred presence, a constant reminder that humans were only one thread in the tapestry of existence. In Pacha lived also the guardians known as Apus, the spirits of the mountains. Towering above valleys and villages, each peak was more than rock and snow. It was a protector, a silent witness to the lives below. The people brought offerings of coca leaves, chicha, and llama fat to the Apus, asking for rain, fertility, and safety. To ignore the mountains was unthinkable. They were ancient beings whose gaze stretched across centuries. Beneath the soil, hidden in darkness and silence, lay the Yuku Pacha, the inner world. It was not a place of fear, but of mystery and renewal. Here dwelled the ancestors, the spirits of the dead, and the seeds waiting to sprout. Uku Pacha was both womb and tomb, the place where life ended, but also where it began anew. To bury a seed in the ground was an act of faith in Uku Pacha, trusting that life would rise again. Caves, springs, and underground passages were considered portals to this hidden realm. Shamans, known as priests of wisdom, would sometimes seek visions there, traveling in spirit to speak with the ancestors or to ask guidance from the powers that dwelled in the depths. These three worlds were not separate. They were bound together by an invisible thread, like steps of a bridge. The Chakana, or Andean cross, symbolized this unity. Its stepped form represented the ladder of existence, connecting Hanan Pacha, Ke Pacha, and Uku Pacha. At the center was the axis, the sacred point where all three worlds met, a reminder that balance was the essence of life. Rituals, festivals, and daily prayers were ways to keep these realms in harmony. When the Incas offered food and drink to the earth, when they danced under the stars, or when they remembered their ancestors, they were not simply performing tradition, they were maintaining the bridge between worlds. Without this balance, the fabric of life could unravel, leaving chaos in its place. To live as an Inca was to walk with awareness of the three Pachas. Every sunrise was a greeting to Hanan Pacha, every step upon the soil was a bond with Ke Pacha, and every burial of seed or ancestor was a conversation with Uku Pacha. Thus, the Incas did not see themselves as isolated beings, but as participants in a cosmic cycle that had no beginning and no end. Their prayers were woven with gratitude, their festivals with reverence, their silence with awe. To them, existence itself was sacred geography, where every mountain, river, and star pointed to the eternal truth, that the worlds above, below, and within were all one. To live in balance with these realms required more than faith. It required action. Through rituals, offerings, and sacrifices, the people sought to maintain harmony with gods, spirits, and the land itself. For the Incas, to live was to give. Life itself was a gift from the gods, and every harvest, every river, every sunrise carried within it a debt of gratitude. This gratitude was not expressed only in words but in acts of offering. Through rituals, the people renewed their bond with the divine, ensuring that balance was preserved between the three worlds. The Incas believed in Aini, the sacred principle of reciprocity. Just as the gods gave their blessings, humans were expected to return something in kind. To receive the warmth of the sun, one must give thanks. To take maize from the earth, one must honor the soil. To drink the water of a spring, one must offer coca leaves or chicha. Nothing was taken freely. Everything was part of a cycle of giving and receiving. Among the most important ceremonies was the Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun. Celebrated at the winter solstice, when the days were shortest and the sun seemed most distant, it was a plea for the return of warmth and fertility. In Cusco, nobles, priests, and people gathered in the Grand Plaza. They wore brilliant garments, their faces painted, their voices lifted in songs that echoed against the mountains. At dawn, they waited in silence for the first ray of sunlight to touch the horizon. When it appeared, the city erupted in joy. Dances, chants, and processions filled the day. Offerings of golden vessels, food, and animals were made to Inti, reminding him of the love of his children. It was not only a celebration of the sun's power, but a renewal of the bond that tied the Incas to their father in the sky. Rituals were not limited to grand festivals. Daily life was filled with small acts of reverence. Farmers would pour the first drops of chicha onto the ground before drinking, a gesture of thanks to Pachamama, the Earth Mother. Travelers would place coca leaves at the feet of the mountains, asking for protection from the Apus. Even in the quiet act of planting, people whispered prayers, recognizing that the seed entrusted to Uku Pacha would return as life only if the gods willed it. At times, more solemn offerings were made. Llamas, revered animals of the Andes, were sacrificed, their blood offered to ensure rain or fertility. In rare and extraordinary moments, children of noble birth were chosen for the Capacocha ceremony. They were not seen as victims, but as messengers, carrying purity and devotion directly to the gods. Buried on mountaintops, their spirits were believed to live eternally with the Apus, watching over the empire. The Incas also used ritual objects to bridge the human and divine. Caros, wooden cups finely carved and painted, were used to pour libations during feasts. Golden and silver idols representing gods or sacred animals were placed in temples and shrines. Fire, smoke, music, and dance created an atmosphere where the worlds intertwined, where mortals and gods could meet, if only for a moment. In Cusco, the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, shone with walls of gold that reflected Inti's light. Here, priests performed the most sacred rituals, their chants rising like bridges of sound. Yet even in the humblest villages, people gathered to honor their local spirits. For the Incas, every corner of the land was alive, and every place demanded its due respect. Through rituals and offerings, the Incas maintained harmony. These acts were not superstition, but sacred duty, a way of keeping the threads of the cosmic fabric strong. Without offerings, the sun might withhold its warmth, the rains might not fall, or the earth might grow barren. To neglect ritual was to invite imbalance, a dangerous forgetting of humanity's place in the grand design. Thus, life itself became a ceremony. Every sip of chicha, every dance in a festival, every handful of coca leaves offered to the wind was part of the eternal dialogue between humans and gods. And in this dialogue, the Incas found not only survival, but meaning, a reminder that they were never alone, but always living within the presence of the sacred. And at the center of this sacred dialogue stood one figure, the Sapa Inca, whose role was not merely to rule, but to act as mediator between humans and the divine. The Inca world was inhabited by invisible presences that gave life, order, and purpose to everything that existed. Although they'd recognized countless spirits and forces, some deities occupied a central place in the life of the Tahuantinsuyo. They were protectors, cosmic fathers and mothers, the ones to whom people turned with their deepest devotion. At the very top of this pantheon stood Inti, the sun god. He was the father of the royal lineage, the protector of the Inca people, and the source of warmth and fertility. His light made the crops grow, marked the rhythm of the days, and served as a symbol of unity across the empire. The sovereigns considered themselves his direct descendants, which gave divine legitimacy to their rule. Alongside Inti shone Mamaquilla, the moon goddess. Wife of the sun and mother of the night skies, she ruled over agricultural calendars and female cycles. Her phases guided the planting and the harvest, while her light served as a lantern in the Andean nights. Women often invoked her as a guardian of the home and a symbol of fertility. Complementing these celestial forces was Ilapa, lord of thunder, rain, and storms. He was imagined as a man dressed in brilliant garments, wielding a sling and a war club. With the sling, he hurled lightning. With the club, he made thunder resound, and from his hands poured the rain that nourished the earth. For farmers, Ilapa was both feared and revered, for his wrath could destroy, but his blessing brought abundance. Deep within the earth lived Pachamama, the Mother Earth. She was not only a goddess, but the soil itself, the mountains, the rivers, everything that nurtured life. To her, people offered coca leaves, chicha, and food before every meal or journey. Any disrespect to her damaging the land without giving something in return could bring misfortune. Pachamama embodied fertility, protection, and the patient force that sustains the world. There was also Mama Cocha, goddess of the sea and of the waters. Coastal peoples honored her so that the waves would be calm and the fishing plentiful. Her presence reminded everyone that water, source of life, could also turn into fury if gratitude was not shown. But not all deities lived in light or fertile ground. The Incas also venerated Supe, lord of the Ukupacha, the world below. He was associated with death, caves, and the hidden. Although feared, Supe was not seen as absolute evil, but as the guardian of the inevitable. His domains reminded the Inca that life and death were part of the same eternal cycle. In the farthest sky dwelled Viracocha, the creator god. According to the legends, he had risen from the waters of Lake Titicaca to shape the heavens, the earth, the animals, and humankind. After ordering the world, he vanished walking across the sea, promising one day to return. Though Inti received more daily worship, Viracocha was remembered as the origin of everything, the great architect of the cosmos. Beyond these great gods, the Incas revered countless huacas, mountains, lagoons, stones, and sacred places that were home to protective spirits. Each community had its own local huasas, constantly receiving offerings. In this way, the divine was not distant, but present in every corner of daily life. The Inca pantheon was a reflection of nature itself, the sun and the moon, the rain and the earth, the sea and death. Each aspect of existence had a face and a will. By honoring them, the Incas were not merely asking for favors, but acknowledging their place in a living universe where everything was woven together in balance. Through him, the empire found order. Yet this order was also celebrated in grand festivals, where the entire people gathered to renew their bond with the gods through music, dance, and offerings. The Incas believed that their emperor, the Sapa Inca, was not merely a political ruler, but a sacred being. He was considered the direct descendant of Inti, the sun god, and therefore stood as the bridge between the divine and the human world. His presence was both earthly and celestial, embodying the will of the gods within the empire. Because of this divine origin, the Sapa Inca's words carried immense weight. To disobey him was not only a crime against the state, but also an offense against the cosmic order itself. In ceremonies, people bowed before him as if they were standing in front of the sun. The Sapa Inca played a central role in rituals and sacrifices. During major festivals, he led the offerings to Inti, Pachamama, and the other gods. He would be the first to present gifts of gold, silver, and food, setting an example for the entire empire. When llamas were sacrificed, it was the Inca who gave the final blessing, ensuring that the gods would hear the prayers of his people. One of his most sacred duties was maintaining harmony between the three realms of the cosmos: Hanan Pacha, the world above; Ke Pacha, the world of the living; and Uku Pacha, the world below. Through rituals, he symbolically connected these realms, guaranteeing balance and prosperity. The Inca's palace in Cusco was not only a political center, but also a spiritual one. Within its walls, priests advised him, oracles were consulted, and ceremonies took place to interpret the will of the gods. Every decision, whether to go to war, to build a new temple, or to expand the empire, was guided by divine approval, with the Sapa Inca as the ultimate interpreter. The emperor also traveled across the vast empire to visit sacred sites and huacas. His presence there reinforced unity, reminding local communities that their offerings and devotions flowed through him directly to the gods. This spiritual authority gave the Inca both power and responsibility. He was expected to embody justice, generosity, and piety. If famine struck or disasters occurred, it was believed that perhaps the Sapa Inca had failed to please the gods or had broken the sacred balance. Thus, the role of the Inca was not just to govern, but to sustain the cosmic order. He stood as the mediator of faith, the chosen child of the sun, and the earthly custodian of harmony between gods and humankind. These celebrations took place in temples and sanctuaries, whose very stones spoke the language of the cosmos. The architecture of the Incas was itself a prayer in stone, rising to meet the sky. The Inca calendar was filled with festivals that honored the gods, marked the rhythm of agriculture, and reinforced the unity of the empire. These celebrations were more than mere gatherings. They were sacred moments where the world of humans and the world of the gods came together in harmony. Perhaps the most important of all was Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun. Celebrated during the winter solstice in June, it marked the moment when the sun seemed weakest, and people prayed for its strength to return. Thousands gathered in Cusco to witness this grand spectacle. Priests, nobles, and the Sapa Inca himself performed ceremonies, offered sacrifices, and danced in honor of Inti. It was a vibrant display of devotion, unity, and hope for a fertile year ahead. Another key festival was Kapok Raymi, celebrated in December to mark the summer solstice. This was a time of purification and renewal. Young nobles underwent initiation rites, proving their strength and readiness to serve the empire. During this festival, people lit fires, held dances, and performed rituals to cleanse the spirit and welcome the new agricultural season. There was also Kapok Hucha, one of the most solemn ceremonies. This was a ritual of great sacrifice, where children were chosen for their purity and offered to the gods on mountaintops or sacred places. Far from being seen as cruelty, this act was believed to ensure cosmic balance, fertility, and protection for the entire empire. Those children were considered blessed, forever living among the gods. Festivals often lasted several days and involved music, dance, and feasting. Drums, flutes, and conch shells echoed across the plazas, while people danced in elaborate costumes that represented animals, spirits, and mythological beings. These dances were not just entertainment, but sacred performances, reenacting myths and reminding people of their place in the cosmic order. Food and drink also played an essential role. Enormous amounts of chicha, the sacred corn beer, were prepared and shared. Drinking together was a symbol of unity, an act that dissolved social divisions and connected everyone in the presence of the gods. The Sapa Inca was always at the heart of these celebrations. His presence, clad in golden garments and headdress, embodied the living sun. Every gesture he made during the ceremonies carried symbolic weight, reaffirming his role as mediator between gods and people. Through these festivals, the Incas renewed their bond with the divine. The cycles of nature, the strength of the sun, the fertility of the earth, and the balance of the cosmos were all celebrated and protected through ritual. Festivals were the rhythm of the empire, the heartbeat of the Andes, echoing devotion, unity, and life itself. Yet temples were not only gateways to the gods, they were also reminders of what awaited beyond life. For the Incas, death was not an ending, but a passage into the spirit world. The Inca Empire was not only known for its vast territories and organized society, but also for its sacred architecture. To the Incas, temples were not merely buildings. They were bridges between the physical and spiritual worlds. Every stone, every wall, and every alignment with the stars carry profound meaning. At the very heart of Cusco stood the most sacred temple of all, the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun. Its walls were once covered with sheets of pure gold, shining so brightly that it was said the temple itself radiated sunlight. Dedicated to Inti, the sun god, it was the spiritual center of the empire. Priests gathered here to perform rituals, observe the heavens, and interpret signs from the gods. The Coricancha was also a cosmic map. Its walls contained shrines for the moon, the stars, and even the rainbow, symbolizing the unity of celestial powers. From the temple radiated a network of sacred lines known as seques, which connected Cusco with hundreds of huacas, mountain springs, and sacred stones across the empire. Through this system, the Coricancha stood as the beating heart of the Inca spiritual world. Another extraordinary site was Machu Picchu, often believed to have been a royal estate with deep spiritual significance. Perched high among the Andean peaks, it was built with breathtaking precision. Many of its structures align with astronomical events, such as solstices and equinoxes, making it both a sanctuary and an observatory. In the highlands of the Andes, other temples also revealed the devotion of the Incas. At Sacsayhuaman, massive stone walls were fitted so perfectly that not even a blade of grass could pass between them. This fortress temple overlooked Cusco like a protective guardian, its giant stones embodying both the strength of the empire and the permanence of the gods. Further south, near Lake Titicaca, stood sacred sites dedicated to Viracocha, the great creator. These places were visited by pilgrims seeking blessings and guidance, reminding all that the gods were present across the vast territory of the empire. What made Inca architecture remarkable was not only its grandeur, but its harmony with nature. Temples were not imposed on the land. They grew out of it, blending seamlessly with mountains, rivers, and skies. Every construction reflected the belief that humans were part of a larger living cosmos, not separate from it. Through these sacred temples and monuments, the Incas created lasting symbols of their faith. The stones still stand today, whispering stories of devotion, astronomy, and the eternal dialogue between the earth and the heavens. And just as the afterlife offered lessons of hope and warning, so too did the legends of heroes and demigods. Their lives, caught between divine and human, gave meaning to the struggles of the people. For the Inca, death was not the end, but a passage into another realm. Life flowed in cycles, and just as the sun rose and set, so too did human existence continue beyond the grave. The afterlife was seen as a mirror of the earthly world, shaped by the deeds and devotion of each person. The soul, or Aya, was believed to journey into one of the three great realms of existence. Those who lived righteous and balanced lives, respecting the gods and the order of the empire, would ascend to Hanan Pasha, the upper world. This was a place of light and abundance, where the sun always shone and food was plentiful. It was a paradise of eternal harmony. Those who had lived ordinary lives, neither virtuous nor sinful, remained in Ke Pacha, the middle world, the same realm as the living. Their spirits lingered close to the land of the living, often protecting their descendants or guiding them through dreams. Ancestors were never considered gone. They were still part of the family, watching, advising, and sometimes intervening in times of need. But those who had acted with greed, cruelty, or disobedience to the sacred order were believed to descend into Uku Pacha, the inner world. This was a dark, subterranean realm associated with Supe, the Lord of Death. Here, souls wandered in shadows, facing hardship and cold, a reflection of their misdeeds on earth. Funeral practices reflected these beliefs. The dead were often buried with food, tools, clothing, and offerings, ensuring that they had what they needed in the next life. Nobles and rulers were mummified, their bodies preserved as sacred beings. These mummies were not hidden away but brought out during festivals, seated in ceremonies and consulted as if still alive. The presence of the ancestors was constant. Families would speak to them, offer coca leaves or chicha, and ask for protection. The living and the dead shared an unbroken bond, each depending on the other to maintain harmony in the cosmos. The myths of the afterlife also carried warnings. To disrespect the gods, to ignore rituals, or to break the sacred order was to risk eternal hardship in Nukupacha. But to live in balance with family, with nature, and with the gods was to guarantee peace and abundance in the world beyond. For the Inca, death was never feared as an absolute end. It was a doorway to another chapter, a continuation of the great cosmic cycle. The spirit world was always near, intertwined with daily life, reminding the people of the Andes that they were part of something eternal. But the world of the Incas was also guided by signs, omens, and the voices of oracles. Through divination, they sought to read the will of the gods and to glimpse the hidden threads of fate. Long ago, when the valleys still remembered the first footsteps of the earth and the peaks kept the hush of earliest dawns, the people of the Andes told stories of men and women who were more than human. These were not ordinary tales of courage and trickery, but stories in which the divine and the mortal braided together. Heroes and demigods walked the mountain passes and riverbanks, teaching techniques of life, laying out laws and showing how to live inside the fragile balance between gods and nature. The first of these beloved figures were the founders, whose names echoed in the plazas and woven into the cloth of families. Manco Capac and Mama Ocalo, emerging from the sacred waters of Lake Titicaca, were part maker, part teacher, and part symbol. The legend said they carried a golden staff given by the sun, and wherever that staff sank into the earth, a center of life would rise. They did not arrive to conquer by force, but to give knowledge. How seeds should be turned into food, how hands might weave cloth that tells the story of a people, how to organize villages so the gods might be honored with balance. Yet the foundation myths were richer and stranger than a single couple. Other versions told of a group of siblings, sometimes called the Ayer brothers and sisters, who left a hidden cave together. Each sibling carried a different fate. Some became leaders, others were transformed into stones or huacas when rivalry and jealousy tested the fragile bonds of kinship. These transformations taught a harsh lesson. Ambition without humility fractures the house of the people, while unity holds the lands together. To hear the tale was to be reminded that human hearts must be kept in check by ritual and respect. Beyond the founding pairs, the Andes shimmered with traveling teachers and wandering demigods. Some were said to have walked across great distances, carrying seeds of law, music, and ritual from one valley to another. Tunupa, a figure remembered in highland legends, wandered across an altiplano as a prophet and lawgiver. He was a teller of weather signs, a bringer of ceremonies, and sometimes a trickster who demanded that people learn through trial. Stories of Tunupa connected scattered sacred places, giving them a common voice and a shared purpose. Heroes in these tales often tested the limits of mortals and gods. They fought against greed, they taught restraint, and they opened paths where none had seemed possible. A hero might wrestle a river spirit to create a new irrigation channel, or negotiate with an apu to allow a village to plant maize in a previously barren slope. These acts were practical and magical at once. The hero's success taught a craft, while the story lived as a charm to guide future harvests. People repeated these stories not only for pleasure, but because they contained techniques of survival wrapped in the authority of myth. Demigods, for their part, embodied contradictions. Born of both human and divine lineage in some traditions, they carried the gifts and the burdens of both worlds. They could heal with a touch and yet suffer the same grief as any parent. Their lives were models and warnings. Often their deeds explain the landscape. A deep canyon might be said to be the cut of a demigod's foot. A hot spring his weeping for lost love. In this way, the map of the land became a map of character and memory, each feature a chapter in an ancestral saga. Heroes and demigods also shaped social life. They taught the rules of reciprocity, the network of obligations that kept villages functioning. A heroic story might end with the foundation of a ritual. After the hero's successful harvest, he instructed the people to offer the first fruits to Pachamama. Thus, myth became law, and law became ritual. This is why many rituals carried the name of a hero or were said to be established by one of their deeds. To perform the ritual was to step into the rhythm set by these ancestral figures, aligning present action with ancient precedent. Some legends told of darker journeys. A hero might descend to the Ukupacha, the inner world, to retrieve a stolen seed or to wrest a sacred object from the hands of spirits. These descent myths served as teaching stories. Bravery includes the willingness to enter the unknown, to face the consequences, and to return changed. Those who returned brought not only objects but sacred knowledge, new rites, new prayers, and new ways to calm the forces that shifted weather and fate. Local variations were common. In one valley, a hero might be remembered as a generous teacher who taught terracing and water management. In another, the same figure might be the founder of an elu, the extended family group that formed the social backbone. These local stories were more than folklore. They were social contracts. By claiming a famous hero as an ancestor, a community grounded its authority in its rights to certain lands and springs. The hero's memory thus became a charter for living together. The rituals for honoring these heroes were sometimes solemn and simple. Offerings were placed at the foot of a rock associated with a beloved deed. A woven cloth was tied to a tree where a heroine once rested. A story was sung at harvest, retelling how the demigod taught a particular planting rhythm. In high ceremonies, the Sapa Inca or local magistrates would recall heroic founders, naming them in long lists that linked the present to a sacred past. To invoke a hero's name was to invite their spirit to bless the labor that followed. There were tales that reached beyond the mountains. Stories of demigods who crossed into lowland jungles and coastal margins explained the presence of foreign crops, strange pottery styles, or unusual rituals. These tales created bridges between ecosystems, suggesting that wisdom could travel and adapt. A demigod who taught terrace farming might be reimagined in the jungle as a teacher of irrigation canals. The same moral core, balance, and respect for the land underpinned both. Love, grief, and sacrifice threaded many of these legends. A demigod who lost a beloved might become a mountain of stone to keep the promise of protection. A hero who gave his life to save a village could be transformed into a shrine where children learned the values of courage and service. Such endings served to sanctify sacrifice. They told listeners that acts of devotion could become permanent guardianship, binding the human story into the larger fabric of the land. At times, the line between myth and history blurred. Great rulers, those who expanded roads, reorganized fields, or led victories, could be remembered as demigods in later songs. They were human in one telling, immortal in another. This blending gave the people models of leadership that were both achievable and awe-inspiring. A ruler who reformed land distribution might be sung as someone favored by Inti. The reforms themselves were then framed not only as political acts, but as continuations of ancestral wisdom. Finally, these legends endured because they were retold. Without a written script, memory itself became sacred. Storytellers, musicians, and weavers preserved tales in different forms, spoken narrative, song, or woven pattern. A textile might depict a demigod's journey, its geometry encoding the sequence of events. A melody could hold the cadence of a ritual invocation. In this way, the story lived in many tongues. The voice, the loom, and the drum each carried a faithful version. To listen to these stories at night was to be part of a long conversation. The heroes and demigods were not distant. They were tutors, parents, and warnings. Their lives taught how to plant, how to forgive, how to negotiate with powerful spirits, and how to act so that the world would continue giving life. For the people who listened, these tales were not idle entertainment. They were a map, a code, and an invitation to live rightly within the fragile splendor of the Andes. And so the voices of the Andes still echo across time. In every stone that rises toward the sky, in every river that winds through the valleys, in every dawn that breaks upon the mountains, the myths of the Inca continue to live. They remind us that the world is not silent, but alive, that balance is the thread of existence, and that every soul is part of a greater whole. May these stories guide your thoughts into quiet reflection as the ancient mountains keep watch and the eternal sun rises once more.